So a few months ago, I'm listening to this podcast put on by the designer Rachel Zoe and her husband. And they're interviewing their fabulous, famous friends about how they met. And it's interesting because the stories are good, but they're very surface level. It's very one note. So this story is about a famous designer and his partner, how they met, but the real story. It's based on that podcast interview that Rachel Zoe and her husband did, but this is what the story would be if people were really honest about how they met.
Of course I knew who he was, probably for years before we ever met at a party in Paris. I'd been modeling and splitting my time between New York, Paris, and LA. He's a pretty big deal, of course, and a friend asked if I'd like to go to this party where he'd be. I was absolutely in. I'm going to take off the veil of humility here to be completely straight with you. If you're going to capture the heart of a famous, powerful person, I learned early on that there are only a few ways to do that. First, you need to be insanely hot and younger than they are, obviously. But just being hot isn't going to carry you to the finish. You need to like what they like. You need to bring the sparkle. You need to have the right type of personality so that you can attend any event, be around business partners or other fabulous friends. You must fit in, and you need to dazzle. Sometimes in that creative, powerful mind of theirs, they get caught up. They're working through some challenge, or they're under a moody, dark cloud. So you have to show them that they can lean on you to not only lift them out of their funk with your charm, grace, looks, and humor, but also be the face of the couple. This you must understand straight away. And at the time, you can't be completely compliant. You need to love what they want 90% of the time, but 10% should be you and unique. So I met him at this party. He asked someone to introduce us. This is where the hot part comes in. If I wasn't hot, that would have never happened. So we meet and we're walking around the apartment laughing about all sorts of things. We loved the honey badger. Remember that from YouTube? I'm making him laugh, doing the honey badger voice. We're making comments about various people at the party, none of whom we know, creating extreme backstories for all of them. Over there, Countess Von Dreary is in a light and felicitous mood. Now that she's cut the brake cables in her husband's Bentley as he's parked in front of her latest mistress's house. We were in our own little world, and I could see how valuable it was for him to have his spirits lifted. That's another thing. You can't be intimidated by the famous and powerful. You need to act as if this is your world. You're in it all the time. Could I have gone home with him that night? Probably, but I decided I'd play a little hard to get. We exchanged numbers, and for the next few days, we had a great text banter. People always send me clever memes, GIFs, and videos, and I'd send the really funny ones to him. It was like we were creating our own little world right there over text, thanks to my fabulous friends. It was coming on Thanksgiving time, and I was supposed to go home to Georgia to be with my family. He was headed off with friends to Corfu, and I get a text the day after he arrived. Why don't you join us? He made a big deal out of telling me I'd have my own room, blah blah. So I called my mother, and I apologized, and I was off on the next plane to Greece. Thank God for frequent flyer miles. Even as a mildly successful model, I don't have the cash to be booking last-minute trips to Europe. We had an amazing time in Corfu, and I'll tell you this, when you're high-flying with people at this level, you can't let money be an issue. To them, money is nothing. It's fluid. If you get in a tizzy because you're spending too much money, you'll never be able to be with a famous, powerful person. Once you pay wherever you're going, someone else will always pick up the tab, and they'll buy all sorts of amazing goodies, extravagant clothing, baubles, etc. You can't be too solicitous or appreciative. You must act like this is just part of your life. I wasn't too worried about him falling in love with me. That's the easy part, lust. The hard part with someone like him is keeping his interest. As I mentioned before, you need to find ways to blend seamlessly into their life. Their life is absolutely more chaotic, more layered, more challenging than yours. So you're the supporting act, and he's the center of the circle of your new universe. The sooner you realize that, the happier you'll be. But you must bring the 10% new, unique, different. For example, I have a couple of loves that are inexplicable to him, but that he can use as party anecdotes or stories to illustrate his happy home. Maybe you play the tuba. Maybe you cry over Ethel Merman performances. Maybe you're entertainingly messy while he's tidy with military-like precision. He discovered early on that secret, despite my intense attention to my diet and exercise routines, that I absolutely adore Kentucky Fried Chicken. He relishes this fact. Yes, he's highbrow. Yes, he's rich and famous. But he's also so down to earth that he's fallen in love with someone who would rather grab a bucket of chicken than dress up for dinner at Catch LA, his favorite. You provide color and nuance to his structured, regimented, challenging life. A bit of pop, but at all times, you are a direct reflection of him. Once we were together, we were together. I moved in almost straight away, but I realized that if I wanted him permanently in my life, or at least as permanently as one can have a famous partner, I needed to seal the deal. I wasn't going to give up my youth to be the boy toy of this famous person, only to be discarded when I turned 35. If I was going to be discarded, then I at least wanted some financial security. One way to not get someone to marry you is to create ultimatums, to throw tantrums, be moody, or taciturn. No, that would break things off very quickly. We'd been together almost 3 years, and it was an amazing 3 years, filled with trips to Europe, the most dazzling Hollywood parties, renovating his house in Hawaii, non-stop excitement, really. And yes, to the world, I was his partner, but there had been partners before me, and I was smart to not get too complacent. He's always been very evolved, and therapy is part of his world, a crutch that he uses to be his highest self. I suggested that in order to grow as a couple, maybe we should have some therapy together. Again, no demands, and I always put things in a way that shows him how whatever I want either charms or helps him in some way. So off we go to therapy. Our shrink, Dr. Jules, one of the more fabulous caftan-wearing therapists in Beverly Hills, helps him understand that though he's perfectly fine not wanting to get married or not seeing the benefit for himself, when you love someone, you can show love. And in reality, how you've grown and gotten closer to realizing your higher self by putting someone else's needs first. I realize it sounds as if I'm manipulative and that I don't love him. That's not true. I do love him very much. And maybe I'm manipulating the situation, but it's for the good of both of us. If you want to stay close to the sun, the center of the circle, you have to understand how to protect yourself and navigate their universe. So yes, I got my engagement at Kentucky Fried Chicken. He loves to tell the story to this day. And he got his big, glossy, glamorous wedding at the Plaza. We're a good match, the two of us. And because I stood up for myself and for what I wanted, I believe I'm more likely to keep this man because he respects me. And he respects the need for me in his universe. And if he ever dumps my ass, there's the Georgia coming out, I'm taking that man for every cent he's got.